Nice. Let's continue taking a look at the situation in Tanzania. We're now joined by media entrepreneur and civic activist Maria Sarungi Tsehai, who's a founder of the hashtag Change Tanzania movement and also a vocal advocate for press freedom, citizen voice, and democratic reform in Tanzania. Maria, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Good to talk to you again.
Thank you, Peter. Also, we thank you for the opportunity.
All right, so when President Sulu Hassan became president, I perhaps naively thought that a woman might have a softer hand on how things would play out in Tanzania. What's been your experience as a Tanzanian?
I think primarily that was something that I've spoke up very early on. I do have a blog on Medium, where I think one of the first things that I pointed out, and also I had an op-ed in the Washington Post where I pointed out that being a woman is not a qualification. And I remember I had to actually have a lot of heated arguments with a number of feminists who were like, give her a chance because she's a woman. But I very early on already indicated that if somebody is not ready to do actual reforms, then any nice rhetoric is not going to make up for that. On top of that, she, I think, very craftily used that gender aspect. She kept going around being labeled as the first Tanzanian female president, and I think at that time she was like the first or second female president, although she was not elected. So there was all that. Kind of, I would say, camouflage that she was able to wrap herself in. But it only took you a little bit, if you know even remotely Tanzanian politics, to sort of see already her tendencies. Under Magufuli, she was the vice president. There was a lot of myth being spread that she didn't know what happened under Magufuli, which, a lot of the Magufuli inside circle said that is not true. But on top of that, during the 2020 election, she said, even if you vote for other parties, it is CCM that will form government. And I remember that we got really upset about that one particular statement. And we insisted that because of that, it's clear she's not going to be a reformist. But come, 2021, she took over after Magufuli's death. She did not do any reforms. She had very nice rhetorics. She set up committees. She set up task forces. She set up a lot of things that look like reform, but were not reform. And that, I think, is where, for me, the red flag started. The next one was the enforced disappearances, which started almost immediately after she took over. People started disappearing. First, there were young men, businessmen. Then there were not that young businessmen, and then activists. And it grew to hundreds. And I've been blowing the whistle on this since 2021. And everybody has been trying very hard to dismiss it and say these are isolated incidences. They're not related. And it is only this year that I think most of the part of the world started waking up due to the abductions, but also the spectacular political killing of Ali Kibao, who was killed very ruthlessly, tortured, and acid was thrown into his face. That in itself was very shocking, and Samia Suluhu stood out and said, "Why is everybody making such a big uproar about one person?" And said in Kiswahili, "Kifo ni kifo tu," meaning death is just death. And she said, "Hundreds die every day from road accidents." That callousness should have been a wake up call for everyone of what she's capable of. And yet, still, a lot of people were defending her.
So, in your view, where is Tanzania now? Because we're seeing protests, we're seeing pushback, social media is being managed. What are you hearing about what's happening inside the country on the ground in the face of this heavy hand by the authorities?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be very clear. The internet shutdown was a way of the government trying to manage the information flow. And the information flow that they were trying to manage was the massacre that they committed. And it is unfortunate that the international media has been trying to spin a narrative that they usually cloak any of such similar looking conflict and call it post election violence. What has to be clear, this was not a post election violence. The violence started before, so there was a pre election. During election, peaceful protesters went out all over the country. These peaceful protesters organized themselves, streets, towns, villages, and they wanted to protest against the election, which everybody knows was not free, was not fair, and nowhere credible. Uh, what happened at that point is that there were two groups of protesters. There were those who protested by sitting at home, and there were those who protested by going out onto the streets. Returning officers at polling stations, and I've been able to communicate with quite a number, and some even sent pictures and descriptions, gave me an example of polling stations saying where there should have been 200, 300 people registered. Only 7 or 20 people turned out. But the returning officers, who are, of course, still scared for their lives, told me and showed me some with photographs how they were told to stuff the ballot box. If there was like 300 registered, they had to show at least 200 voted, which of course was ridiculous, because you see, you can't make up the numbers. There are no photographs you can show with that kind of amount of people. If you only have 7 people, and was a form of boycott as well. But on top of that, there were protests, and and most of them were young who were doing the protest. They had made a decision. They wanted to go out onto the streets. And, we were trying as much as possible as activists, and civil society, telling them, if you go out, you need to wear a mask, you need to carry your water, carry a flag, carry a banner. And they started out really, like, very peacefully. Immediately, like on the 29th, by midday, or around 1 o'clock, we started getting news of shooting. Now, because there was so many things happening, we thought that these were like one or two police were out of hand who got too excited and decided to, shoot around. Little did we know that there was organized squads. Now, these squads are also the same kind of makeup of death and abduction squads that have been terrorizing Tanzanians for years. And these have been fully empowered by the state. It involves police. We now know, and his audio has leaked and he has acknowledged, but there are witnesses, many witnesses. There's even a case against him. Is the zonal criminal officer of Dar es Salaam, who is called Faustin Mafwele. He has been named. He has been named by a survivor that he is the one who ordered his execution, and he survived. He has been named. He has bragged. He's the one who was behind the torture of Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atuaire, who are both Kenyan and Ugandan respectively. Activists were tortured in Tanzania. So he's well known. He's the one who's running these squads all over the country, and it was his squad, together with unknown figures, so-called, we've dubbed them mercenaries. They didn't speak Kiswahili, which I think most of your audience understands that in Tanzania, Kiswahili is the national language, and any Tanzanian has to speak Kiswahili because you don't survive. Like English is an additional language. They didn't speak Kiswahili. They looked different in many aspects. That's what people have described them as. They were wearing masks, and they had really heavy weapon, like heavy artillery weapons. I have all the photos. They were able to shoot through walls, cement walls. I mean, they came to kill. And they were moving around on top of hard-top Land Rovers with darkened windows, with no plate number, and some were sitting on the roof, and they were just shooting randomly. Additionally, there were snipers. So the bloodbath started on the 29th, but in return, the protesting, especially the youth, got so angry that they started attacking symbols of authority. So for them, the symbols of authority included police stations, of course, because they assumed that was the police. They went for CCM buildings, because that was also another symbol of authorities. They went for businesses of people that they perceived were enablers or perpetrators of any form of oppression. So in that sense, this rage that people are trying to bring about the infrastructure was not because the youth came out with the intention, but that because they were being shot. Now, the narrative, immediately, they tried to control the narrative, but the pictures started coming out of the shooting. And they shut it down, thinking that we didn't get them. But because we didn't have enough information, we just received them, and we were like, where does this happen and all that? And the internet was shut down. And then the charade started. Once the charade started, they needed sometimes intermittently to open up a little bit the internet. And immediately we started getting all the news from the ground. And now, yesterday, when they had to switch on the internet, they are covering up, they're busy as we speak, covering up hundreds of bodies. They went into houses. They murdered people. They shot indiscriminately. This is a keep saying that because people think that the last count that we had, which was still at that time, it was coming from hospitals in morgues. There were around 700, 800. This was before they shut down again the internet, and then they started going house to house. I had several messages that came in afterwards whereby people were pleading and saying they've come into the house, they've taken men who are 15 and above, including old men, and they've just disappeared with them. This is something that we hear has happened in Rwanda, in Congo. This is not normal. And unfortunately, Samia Suluhu is trying to cover up. This is a coup d'etat. She has taken power without the will of the people. She sworn herself in secrecy on a military base. So tell me, how is that different from somebody who takes power with an army through coup d'etat? It's not different. And therefore, I think the world has to stop sanitizing whatever happened. This was a coup d'etat, this was a massacre, and there was no election. She's an illegitimate president. And if we do not immediately wake up to this, the anger on the ground is big. People are waking up, they're sharing images, and people are angry. But most of all, what is being fueled is Samia Suluhu and her murderous cabal are not acknowledging the deaths. They said nobody died. They said 10 people died. And they do not want to acknowledge that thousands have died. Worse, they're covering up. They are not allowing people to get the bodies. They have shipped out the bodies with trucks. They have buried them in some mass graves. In some cases, we've heard they've taken them to furnaces to burn them. We have heard cases of patients, and I've had many doctors pleading with me to help somehow. They were standing outside hospitals and collecting patients with gunshot wounds and disappearing with them, presumably killing them because they were not in any police station. We are talking about massive, massive massacre. And the world needs to stop talking about reconciliation, talking about normalcy. Nothing is going back to normal after this. How can you say we need to sit down and talk? And by the way, there was no political party involved. They're trying to scapegoat Chadema. They tried to scapegoat the
Right,
activists. Nobody
right.
was involved. Sorry, I'm talking too much. I'm sorry
Yes.
about that.
Maria, we're
I
going
have
to
a lot
have
to
to
say.
leave it there, but what I can promise is that we'll pick this up again because it's too important to ignore. But thanks so much indeed for that
Thank you,
initial
Peter.
conversation. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye, Peter.
Thank you. That's Maria Sarungi Tsehai giving us a horrific update on what's happening in Tanzania. She says that thousands could have been killed already by now. We'll keep a track of that story.